Since we want to delve into Aristotle's philosophy as a useful introduction to it for us, let us raise some questions. 10 in number. 1. Where do the names of the philosophical schools come from? 2. What is the division of the Aristotelian writings? 3. Where should one begin the Aristotelian writings? 4. What obvious utility does the Aristotelian philosophy have for us? 5. What will guide us to it? 6. How should an auditor of philosophical lectures prepare himself? 7. What is the form of the narrative? 8. Why has the philosopher obviously made a point of being obscure? 9. How many and what sort of prerequisites are there for the study of each of the Aristotelian writings? 10. What sort of person should a commentator on them be? The philosophical schools get their names in 7 ways. 1 is after their founder, as the Pythagoreans, Epicureans, and Democritians are named after those who founded each of these schools: Pythagoras, Democritus, and Epicurus. Another is after the country of the founders, as for instance the philosophy called Cyrenaic. Another is after the place where they studied, as for instance the Stoics, since they studied in the painted Stoa, or the members of the Lyceum or the Academy, who also take their appellations from a place. Another is after their kind of life, as for instance the Cynic philosophers, who were called dogs on account of their frank speech and contentiousness, for a dog can distinguish family members from others, and that is how these philosophers behaved. They received those worthy of philosophy hospitably, but chased away those unworthy and incapable of mastering philosophical reasoning. That is why they are called cynics, and also why Plato said, "Even a dog has something of the philosopher in him." Philosophical schools are also named after their manner of disputation and philosophizing, as for instance the undecided philosophers. They thought themselves quite unworthy of the name philosophers, since they sought the nature of things but did not succeed. For they said that there is total ignorance, and that no one knows anything. Although Plato refutes them with other strong arguments, he also uses a sort of refutation which is drawn from their own doctrine. "Do you claim," he says, "that you know there to be total ignorance, or that you do not know? If you do not know this, we will surely not believe you, since your claim is just talk. But if you do know it, then there is cognition." In support of their claim that there is no knowledge, they use this argument: if there is to be knowledge, the knower must conform to what is known. And if the knower is to conform, then either what is known must stand fast and always be the same, or if it should change, the knower would have to go along and change with it. If, therefore, things are not fixed but always change, and our soul cannot follow along and change with them, the result will necessarily be ignorance. Now, indeed they were right to say that things change and are always in flux and effluence, i.e. in flow and change. That is why when one of the ancients said that one cannot step into the same river twice in the same place, another one replied to him with the truly penetrating thought that one cannot do it even once, for at the same time one puts one's foot in, water flows over it, before the rest of the body goes in. Now, as I said, they were right in asserting this, but they were wrong to suppose that our soul cannot follow along, for Plato proved that good souls not only do not come upon things afterwards, but actually anticipate them, and meet them first with the speed of their own movement, and in this way they apprehend them. The schools are also named after something accidental, as with the Peripatetics, for since Plato walked while he thought, wishing to exercise his body, lest its deterioration be an obstacle to his mental activities, his successors, that is to say, Xenocrates and Aristotle, were named Peripatetics. Of these, Aristotle taught at the Lyceum, and Xenocrates at the Academy. But later on the place was omitted, and the followers of Aristotle were called Peripatetics, after the activity of their teacher, whereas, in the case of the followers of Xenocrates, it was the activity that was omitted, and they were called academics, after the place. Schools are also named for the goal of their philosophy, as with the hedonists, for they said that pleasure is the goal of life, not, indeed, the pleasure which the masses seek, I mean affective pleasure, but the soul's total freedom from emotion. Since, therefore, we have stated in how many ways and from what source the schools of philosophers have been named, let us take up the second question, and produce a division of the Aristotelian writings. Now, some of them are particular, some are universal, and some are in between the universal and the particular. The particular are those that he wrote to someone in particular, either letters or other such writings. The universal are those in which he inquired into the nature of things, such as De Anima, De Generatione e Corruptione, and De Caelo. In between are the historical ones that he wrote, such as some 250 constitutions written by him. He did not write these for anyone in particular, nor are they universal, for the Constitution of Athens or those of other cities, for example, could not be universal. He wrote them so that people after him, reading and making judgments about how to govern justly and how not, might choose some and shun others and be helped in this way. But let us put aside the particular and the in-between. Among the universal works, some are systematic and some are notebooks. The works called notebooks are those in which only the main points are registered. Note that in ancient times, those who proposed to write would compile in summary fashion their own particular discoveries into an exposition of the subject. Then they would take many thoughts from even older books in order to confirm the ones that were correct and refute those that were not. Last of all, of course, they composed their writings, making them beam with the beauty of their words and the ornamentation of their narrative. In this way, the notebooks differed from the systematic works, in ordering and in beauty of expression. Some of the notebooks are uniform, e.g., when an inquiry is conducted into some one thing. Others are diverse, e.g., when it is conducted into many things. Some of the systematic works, on the other hand, are in dialogue form, e.g., those which are set out dramatically in question and answer form among several characters. Others are in propria persona, e.g., the ones Aristotle wrote as coming from himself. The dialogues are also called popular, whereas the writings in propria persona are also called axiomatic, or schoolworks. It is worth asking why on earth they were named this way. Some say that the dialogues are also called popular because Aristotle does not openly exhibit his own aim in them, but rather models his discussion after those of other people. But this is false. They are called popular because Aristotle wrote them for those who understand superficially. The philosopher deliberately used a clearer style in these works, and his proofs are not so much demonstrative as they are plausible, deriving from received opinions. The others are called schoolworks, since they would have to be listened to attentively by one who is serious and in fact a genuine lover of philosophy. Among the schoolworks, some are theoretical, some are practical, and some instrumental. The theoretical ones are concerned with the discrimination of the true and the false. The practical ones are concerned with the discrimination of the good and the bad. But since in the theoretical realm some things creep in as apparently true without being true, and similarly in the practical realm some things are colored with the name of the good without being good, we need some instrument to discriminate such things. What is it? Demonstration. Next, among the theoretical works there are the theological, the mathematical, and the natural. And among the practical works there are the ethical, the economical, and the political. And among the instrumental works, some go into matters concerning the first principles of the method, some into matters concerning the method itself, and some into matters concerning other ways of contributing to the method. By the method, I mean the demonstrative one, since a demonstration is a scientific syllogism. Before knowing it, one must know the syllogism in general. But since this name, syllogism, does not denote a simple but rather a compound, for it signifies an aggregation of statements, before turning to the syllogism, it is therefore necessary to study the simples of which they are composed. These are propositions, but these too are compounds, out of nouns and verbs, which will be taught in the categories. Propositions will be taught in of interpretation, and the syllogism in general in the prior analytics. These then are the principles of the method. The posterior analytics teaches us the method itself, that is, the demonstrative syllogism. But again, just as physicians who pass on medical information to the young mention teachings of noxious things along with beneficial ones so that they might choose the former and avoid the latter, so also here, since sophists cause trouble for those who seek the truth and want to mislead them with sophistical syllogisms, the philosopher also writes them down so that we may avoid them. These are said to be inclined in the method in another way, just as if someone wanting to teach how statements should be put together were to cover syllables before nouns and verbs, and letters even before syllables. Letters, syllables, and nouns and verbs are said to be the principles of the method of how writing should be composed. Those concerning the composition itself concern the method itself. But if one also wanted to count the vices of discourse, one would say that he discusses things that are included in the method in another way as well. And this is the division of Aristotle's writings. In the third place, let us ask, where should one begin? The natural sequence would be to begin with the ethical treatise, so that after first disciplining our own character, we might in that way get to the other writings. But he has used demonstrations and syllogisms in that treatise too, and we are likely to be ignorant of them, being untutored in this kind of discourse. So, for this reason, we must begin with logic, having first, of course, disciplined our own character with the ethical treatise. After logic, we must go on to ethics, and then take up the physical treatises, and after those the mathematical ones, and finally the theological ones. In the fourth place, in addition to these questions, one must ask what purpose and what obvious utility the Aristotelian philosophy has for us. We answer that it is to ascend to the common principle of all things, and to be aware that this is the one goodness itself, incorporeal, indivisible, uncircumscribed, infinite, and of infinite potentiality. For goodness is not the only thing that is good. Notice that just as what we call white is a body that has received whiteness, whereas what we call whiteness is the quality itself, so too a body that has received goodness and participates in it is called good, whereas goodness is a kind of substance and being. In the fifth place, in addition to these questions, let us ask what will guide us to the aforementioned principle. And what we reply is that first the ethical treatise, and then, after that, the one on physics, and then the mathematical one, and finally, after these, we will grasp theology. In the sixth place, let us ask how one should prepare oneself to listen to what is to come in Aristotle's writings. We reply that one must be educated in character and pure of soul. For the impure is not allowed to attain the pure, as Plato said. Seventh, it is our task to inquire what the form of the narrative is. We reply that the philosopher evidently has different styles of communication. In the schoolworks, he is dense and terse and aporetic in his thoughts, yet not overly refined in his expression, for the sake of the discovery and clear knowledge of the truth. But he is also one who makes up words, if need be. However, in the dialogues which he wrote for the general public, he deliberately employs a certain volume and over-elaboration of speech and metaphor. Moreover, he changes the form of speech depending on the personalities of the speaker. And, in a word, he knows how to embellish any type of discourse. And in his letters, finally, it is evident that he has successfully adopted an epistolary style, which, must be concise and clear and free of any harsh combination or expression. 8. Let us ask why on earth the philosopher is contended with obscure teaching. We reply that it is just as in the temples, where curtains are used for the purpose of preventing everyone, and especially the impure, from encountering things they are not worthy of meeting. So too, Aristotle uses the obscurity of his philosophy as a veil, so that good people may for that reason stretch their minds even more, whereas empty minds that are lost through carelessness will be put to flight by the obscurity when they encounter sentences like these. Next, the 9th question to be asked is how many and what kind of issues of interpretation of any Aristotelian work should be anticipated. We reply that there are 6 in number. First, there is the aim of the book, for just as an archer, for example, has a mark towards which he shoots and which he wants to hit, so also a writer has some end in view, which he is eager to attain. One must then inquire what this is. Second, in addition to this, we must ask what use we will derive from the work. If this is not apparent along with the aim, for it generally follows. Third is what is the order? Fourth, what is the explanation of the title, if it is not clear beforehand, as in the case of De Caelo or of De Generatione e Corruptione. Fifth, is it a genuine or a spurious work of the philosopher? Many people have composed works signed with Aristotle's name, which must be rejected on the basis of both form and matter. The form here is the intricacy of the thoughts and the truth that is evident in the language. The matter is the expression and the narration of the teaching. Sixth, one should ask what main points it is divided into. Just as it is someone who has carefully examined each of the limbs and joints of a human being who knows best the whole human being composed of them. So too, it is one who has gone through in detail the main points into which a discussion is divided who knows the discussion best. In the 10th place, after everything else, one must inquire what sort of person a commentator on Aristotle's writings needs to be. We reply that he must know very well that which he is about to comment on, and must also be an intelligent man, in order to present the philosopher's thought and to examine closely the truth in what he says. For one must not, so to speak, sell oneself completely and accept what is said and in all earnestness support everything that one comments upon as true, even if it is not. Rather, one must examine each point closely, and, if it should turn out that way, prefer the truth to Aristotle. In this way, then, should the commentator prepare his commentary. But since we want to begin with the treatise on the categories, let us now examine the questions raised a little way back. The first concerns the aim. Notice that commentators have differed on this, some saying that the philosopher is discussing words, some saying things, and some concepts. Those of each group support their claims with textual passages. Those who say it is about words say that when he says, among things that are said, some are said in combination, some without combination, he's obviously distinguishing words. Those who say it is about things say that he is obviously distinguishing these when he says, among the things that there are, some are said of some subject and some are in a subject. And those who say that it is about concepts point out that after completing the doctrine of the 10 categories, he says, concerning genera, that is sufficient. The genera he is talking about are clearly later in origin and are notional entities. Whence also Porphyry says, therefore the description we have given of the concept of genus includes nothing excessive or deficient. So, Aristotle's aim concerns only concepts. Although these people appear to disagree when they say these things, in reality, they all speak the truth, even though not completely, but only in part. It is as if in defining man, one person were to say that man is an animal, and another were to say that rational by itself is enough. and yet another that man is mortal. The three speak the truth, but none of them states the complete definition. The philosopher's aim here, therefore, is to treat words that mean things through mediating concepts. So when one says that one of the things we mentioned is the aim, one necessarily implies the remaining two as well, as we will show. For in saying that it is about words, one means that it is about meanings, for there is not even one study by a philosopher dealing with meaningless words. These meanings clearly signify things through mediating concepts. For when talking about a certain thing, one first has the concept of it, and then one expresses it. So it is altogether necessary that one will be discussing all three. But even those who say that it is about things must bring in the means, i.e., the concepts. Since some of these are in bare thought, such as goat stags and the like, whereas some really exist independently, those people will surely say that the philosopher is not talking about things found in bare thought, but rather about things that have a real and independent existence. Aristotle will teach us about these things not by pointing at them with his finger, but rather by means of words that signify them through mediating concepts. And as for those who say that concepts are the sole purpose, we reply that concepts are concepts of things, and that he who is engaged in teaching about these things teaches through words that signify them. Thus, whichever one of the three one were to mention, one would necessarily have to admit the other two as well. So we were right to say that the philosopher's aim is to lecture about words that signify things through mediating concepts, and this is reasonable, for the book at hand is primary both for the treatment of logic and for all of the Aristotelian philosophy. Thus, as a primary treatment of logic, it teaches about words, but also, as an introduction to the rest of the Aristotelian philosophy, it makes a division of beings, that is, of things. That this is done through mediating concepts is clear from the fact that when the extremes are thought, necessarily the means are also taught along with them. We said a little while back that there are two branches of philosophy, the theoretical and the practical, and that whereas the theoretical concerns the recognition of the false and the true, the practical concerns the discrimination of the good and the bad. But since in each of these branches something that is not true masquerades as true, or something that is not good masquerades as good, in order for people not to be deceived by them, they need an instrument to discriminate such things for them, one that they can use as a rule or a standard to reject what is unsuitable. And this instrument is demonstration. But a demonstration is a syllogism, and a syllogism, as we have already said, is not a simple thing, but rather a collection of statements which are, to be precise, propositions, and which are composed of nouns and verbs. We also said that nouns serve as subjects, whereas verbs are predicated, and these are composed of syllables. But these syllables do not per se signify anything, and for this reason, there is no study of them by the philosopher. We will not stop with nouns and verbs, although we will not go beyond to their syllables either. It is therefore necessary that there be something intermediate between them. Accordingly, we say that prior to nouns and verbs, there is the first application of simple words. For one should be aware that nature, recognizing that the human animal was going to be sociable, gave him speech so that by means of it, people might indicate their own thoughts to each other. And after they banded together, human beings agreed with one another that this, for example, would be named wood, and that stone, and that the word Socrates would signify a certain substance, and walk a certain action. In this way, then, all words came to name what they signified. In sharpening the focus for a second time, people observed that articles, but not tenses, can be attached to some words, which they called nouns, and that tenses, but not articles, are attached to others, which are the ones they called verbs. Aristotle's aim, then, is to treat not simply nouns and verbs, but rather the first application of simple words, signifying simple things by means of simple concepts. Then are all words discussed in the categories? I think not, for they are infinite in number, and infinite things do not lend themselves to science. But he reduces them all to certain universal words, not an indefinite number, but limited to the number 10. And all words are reduced to these, which are substance, quality, quantity, relative, where, when, doing, being affected, position, having. And this is the aim. The usefulness is clear immediately. If the book, the categories, is the beginning of the study of logic, and logic, as we have said, discriminates for us the true from the false and the good from the bad, the aforementioned book is therefore useful to us. Moreover, the order is also immediately obvious to us, since we said that the first application of simple words precedes that of nouns and verbs, whereas nouns and verbs precede simple propositions, and they precede universal syllogisms, and they precede demonstrative syllogisms. It is with reference to the order of these things, accordingly, that the books have been composed as well. We must ask why on earth he entitled the book The Categories. We answer accordingly that he proposes to teach about the genera and species, and that the species are subject for their genera, and the genera are predicted of their species. Therefore, individuals are subjects only. Subordinate species and genera are subjects for those that precede them and are predicated of those that come after them, and the ultimate genera are only predicated. So, since the 10 expressions under investigation are names of ultimate genera, i.e., are only predicated and are never subjects, that is why he entitled it The Categories. One should be aware that 40 copies of the Analytics have been found in the ancient libraries, but only 2 of the categories. One of these has the beginning, among things that there are, some are called homonyms, whereas some are called synonyms. The second is the very one we now have in front of us. This is preferred, since it has the advantage in order and material, and everywhere declares Aristotle its father. All agree that the work is a genuine composition of Aristotle, for it is evident that in all of his writings he makes mentions of the theories here. Wherefore, if this is spurious, so are those, but if those are genuine, this will be genuine also. Nevertheless, one should be aware that the discovery of the categories is not his, but rather existed previously. However, their organization is due to him. The book is divided into 3 parts. One is that of the pre-categories, one, the categories themselves, and one, the post-categories. The pre-categories will be a useful introduction for us in the doctrine of the categories. For since he was going to mention in the doctrine of the categories certain words that are unknown to us, that is why he wishes to teach about them beforehand, so he would not appear to throw his account into confusion. He discusses the post-categories at the end. For since in teaching the categories he used certain other words that are not known, he goes on later to define them. But we must ask why on earth he did not also teach them before the categories. We replied that at the beginning he mentioned those words that he anticipated would not be known at all, but some he kept for the end, since they would be known from ordinary usage, without our having a precise understanding of them. That is the reason he used them in the doctrine of the categories without defining them. For in ordinary usage, everybody uses the word simultaneous, and the word before, and the noun motion. Accordingly, he gives a more precise account of what is signified by them, but some have said that these have been appended spuriously by people who want to read the topics right after the categories. And indeed, they even entitled the book before us the pre-topics. But these people do outright battle with the manifest facts and the order. If you really taught that the primary position of simple words immediately precedes that of nouns and verbs, and he teaches in the categories about the position of simple words, whereas in the interpretation he teaches about nouns and verbs, then each of the 2 books is connected to the other like a chain, and before the latter one cannot read anything other than the categories, nor after the former anything other than the interpretation. And the same argument and order applies all the way up to the posterior analytics, that is, the apodictics.